All right, welcome to week 13. Let's get this going. This week we are dealing with the first of two federal institutions that are supposed to be above politics or apolitical. Now, what does that notion mean that political institutions that are part of the government are nevertheless not political? On the part of the bureaucracy, which is the subject of Chapter 11, the idea is that civil servants are in the business of implementation and not the kinds of activities that we commonly consider to be political, which is more, kind of a conflict area. In this sense, members of the federal bureaucracy are trained to help convert legislation and executive orders into policy, but because they're not elected, they're not really supposed to act on whatever political beliefs they may hold. So they want to be objective in that sense. In fact, during the New Deal, Congress became so worried about the prospects of the rapidly growing civil service becoming excessively influential that they passed the Hatch Act in 1939. This law is supposed to enforce upon members of the federal civil service an injunction to avoid overt expressions of political opinions, particularly when they're in the business, when they're in the act of doing their jobs. Now, who do you think the Hatch Act was particularly aimed at? Having read a little bit about the context of the 1930s, I can tell you there were two sets of civil servants that legislators were particularly worried about: postal workers and the military. With the latter, I think the concern is clearly justified. The military operates within a chain of command. They have a lot of guns, and how hard would it be for a partisan general to call on troops to, under his command to issue an order to cast their ballots for one party or the other? In the case of the Postal Service, the challenge is just about how large a presence the Postal Service has in all 50 states. If you think about it, there are post offices virtually throughout the United States, in large urban areas, in tiny towns, even out in the countryside. There are over 700,000 people working for the USPS, and that's a lot of voters at minimum who are effectively federal workers. The Hatch Act is designed to basically set rules in place that make it difficult for civil servants to influence the competitive aspect of politics. Now, in other words, the Hatch Act is warning bureaucrats to stay out of electoral politics. Now, the Hatch Act has been liberalized in the 1990s, but there's still the expectation that civil servants are supposed to be apolitical. So, the bureaucracy is supposed to be above politics, but they often engage in activities that can draw them into political battles, particularly in this hyper-partisan environment where the two parties have such diametrically opposed visions of what the government should and should not be doing. Think, for example, about a government corporation, right? What is a government corporation? That's an enterprise that the federal government sets up in order to engage in activities that are desirable and contribute to economic well-being of particular areas, but that don't have sufficiently clear profit potential to draw private businesses to invest the capital. So here's a contemporary example. An example of a government corporation is Freddie Mac. So what is it that Freddie Mac does? They create secondary markets for mortgages. And what does that mean? It means that Freddie Mac, along with another government corporation named Fannie Mae, buy mortgages from savings and loans banks with the intent of lifting from those institutions the risk they assumed when they extended the loans to people trying to buy homes. So why should government be doing that? Very simply, it incentivizes banks to extend more mortgages. In other words, it facilitates an expansion in home ownership. And owning a home is considered to be one of the clearest pathways into the middle class. So in one sense, this is clearly desirable activity. More homeowners means more financial security in old age, which reduces poverty among the elderly. Do the political parties view the activities of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae similarly? Not really. Democrats really support both of them. Republicans generally want to shut them down. So why do Democrats love Freddie and Fannie, and why do Republicans hate them? Ideology is probably the best explanation. Democrats believe in expanding the middle class, giving low-income Americans an opportunity to own a home in a relatively non-intrusive and low-cost way by expanding those opportunities. Republicans, on the other hand, believe that such programs are in fact intrusive and create the risk of moral hazard, in which financial institutions engage in increasingly risky extensions of loans to riskier pools of mortgage seekers. There's a lot to be said for both positions. I'm not interested in advocating one side or the other. in teaching this class. What I do hope you'll think about is the position it puts the people working for Freddie and Fannie in. That one set of politicians wants to make their jobs easier and another one wants to get rid of their jobs altogether. Now imagine being a regulator working for the Securities and Exchange Commission, otherwise known as the SEC. You're charged with protecting the marketplace from powerful investors who might want to manipulate the market to guarantee even richer returns. As a federal regulator, you make a nice salary, but nothing in comparison to what the white shoe investing firms make. And you're likely to be investigating. So how easy is it for the investment banking industry to pressure SEC regulators to look the other way? How much money does the investment banking industry pay to lobbyists to persuade Congress to cut the funding of regulatory agencies like the SEC, so that they have to cut staff and do more with fewer regulators? How often are regulators offered cushy jobs to cross over and work within the investment banking community to help them learn how to better evade regulatory scrutiny? Again, it's a problem and a challenge that you face. One current events issue I would like to talk about briefly in this class that has relevance both for what we learned in chapters 7, 9, 10, and will learn in chapter 14 as well. So back in September, there was a whistleblower complaint that came to light alleging that President Donald Trump suspended a military aid package to Ukraine and insisted, or various times suggested in a July 25th phone call to the newly elected President Volodymyr Zelensky, that he order an investigation into allegations of corruption on the part of Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden for activities that they undertook in Ukraine. I think there's too much detail to cover this issue fairly, especially on a forum video. But the idea of whistleblowing is important for understanding how the relationship between the bureaucracy and the president can become very, very complicated. Civil servants generally just want to do their jobs, whereas presidents want what we political scientists describe as responsive competence. Okay. The allegation that the president wanted to coerce the president of Ukraine to open a foreign investigation of a likely 2020 Democratic rival, it is likely to pick up steam, and by the time this video actually comes up, there might be something really going on. What's your take on this? Was the whistleblower just doing his job and pointing out unconstitutional actions of a president, or was he part of a deep state attack on Trump, who's a victim of unfair partisan smears? Let me know what you think. And again, with this chapter, as with all chapters, if there's something in there that you're not getting, let's talk about it in the forum, okay? Let's have a great week.